Hey everybody, welcome to the Happy Harvest Homestead. This is day 2 of our practice round of living without electricity, and it starts with breakfast. How fun!
Okay.
So we put the clothes in, and we have one of those little bumpy things that you can scrub. And you have a plunger, you can plunge the clothes. That's soapy and that's clean, right?
We could do one more to show you.
Sure.
The rag.
Okay, good demonstration.
And it's kind of hard to tell if they're stains from the past or new ones, so I kind of just scrub some and see if it comes off. Then kind of dip it again, just scrub it because it's fun. And then I kind of wring it out, and then put it over here. And then you just rinse it and kind of squeeze it and squeeze as much water out of it as you can, and then put it through the wringer, and then put it in the bucket, and then we'll hang them up. I'm not sure how to do it like this.
Yeah, I think that's good. You can pin it if you want.
What if we just, but the wind might blow?
Oh, true. Guess what I get to do? Ah, yay! The challenge is over. We went for 2 whole days without using electricity. Alright, so now that the practice is over, we've made a list of things we learned, and I'm going to share them with you guys partially so you can learn from them as well, but partially just so that we have a record of it, so if we forget some of these things or lose the paper we wrote them down on, we can watch this video back and remember. So the first thing is you want candles for every person. It was really hard being in a room at night and having proper light. Like with a flashlight, you can't set it there and leave it to illuminate the whole room. You have to kind of carry it in your hand. So for example, when we wanted to shower, it was hard to do with a flashlight, so we brought a candle in and that lit the whole room up without having to hold it all the time. But we didn't have enough candles for each person, so that was a problem. That next time we try this, we're going to fix. We're going to have 1 candle for each person. This next thing we learned isn't really something we can do much about, but if you're in the process of building a house or planning on building a house instead of already living in a built house like we are, we learned that we don't have enough windows in our house and we wish there was more windows, especially in high use areas like the kitchen or bathrooms. Because we were relying on natural light only during the day, we couldn't see as well, and we were using flashlights even during the daytime sometimes because we didn't have enough windows letting in light. Something else which probably is pretty obvious, but something we did write down, is we do eventually want to get solar panels so that eventually we can create our own electricity. Another thing we learned is that we need more of the cooking things we used. So like the solar oven and the rocket stove and even kind of the wood stove, it was all too small. We have a large family and we eat a lot of food, and we weren't able to, for example, fit our huge pot on the rocket stove properly. It was too big for it, so it'd be nice if we had 2 rocket stoves or a bigger rocket stove or like a bigger wood stove so we could have more than 1 pan on there at the time. It took a long time to cook all our food because we can only have 1 thing on 1 place at one time, instead of on our electric oven when we can have multiple pans cooking at the same time. Going along with doubling up on things, we need a second sink plug. During this practice, we were washing dishes by hand, but we weren't able to fill both sides of the sink with water because we only had one plug. So we had one sink plugged and full, and then a pot in the other sink full of water, so we could have the soapy water and then the clean water. But it would have been nicer if we could just have 2 plugs and plug both sides of the sink. It would have also been better if we put our stoves closer to the house and especially the kitchen. The way we set it up, we had to walk super far way out to the garage to cook our stuff, and it would be much easier if we set up our things closer to the house so we could just walk from the kitchen outside real quick instead of having to walk that super long way. One thing we did do right and we really liked was having that white table out there to be kind of our outdoor kitchen counter. It would have been really hard to prepare stuff and set stuff to cool and just work effectively if we didn't have a countertop, or in this case a plastic tabletop. So that was one thing we did right. This next item might be a bit trivial, but it is something to note. We ended up blackening our oven mitts, probably because we were cooking over an open flame and the flame like charred the sides of the pot or something like that, but we got our oven mitts really black. So purely for aesthetic purposes, we need to get black oven mitts or something so that it doesn't show the stain. Next on the list kind of goes with the housing lighting thing. We also noticed that without the garage lights able to turn on, our garage natural lighting with the small little windows we have is not nearly enough. It was super dark all day long, so more natural lighting in our garage would be really great as well. Okay, this one is a big one. We had the worst time timing our meal prep and cooking and eating. We were cooking in the dark with flashlights. It took us all day to cook just a few simple meals. If we were doing this more long term, we would need a lot more practice with our timing of cooking, especially starting cooking way ahead of time so that we don't end up cooking and eating in the dark. And kind of going along with that, we had a hard enough time cooking fairly simple meals on our wood stove and rocket stove and solar oven. So if we were doing this more long term, there would be no way that we would cook like fancy elaborate meals. We would probably go even simpler than the meals we cooked during our practice. Like for example, instead of toasting our bread into toast for breakfast, we would just eat bread not toasted. Simple things like that that's super easy to do with electricity is a lot more difficult without it. The next thing on the list has to do with the wood stove. This morning on the second day, we were having issues with the oven cooking properly. After a bit of trial and error, we learned that you need to have the fire throughout the whole oven. You can't just have a super hot fire in the one half and then a little less fire on the other half, because then everything cooks unevenly and it's a really huge headache. So making sure there is fire and the fire is evenly heating the whole oven part and then also the whole top part is very necessary. And then also along with that, we learned the hard way that you can't have the fire too hot, or like you can't heat it up too much. At one point the fire was too cold, and so we built it up a whole bunch to get it warm enough, but then it overheated, and instead of cooking our food fast, it burned the outside while leaving the middle still uncooked. So gradually increasing the temperature by adding more wood and stuff, instead of drastically and sharply, is the way to go. Something else we learned about outside cooking on a fire is that it's really good to gather all of your sticks, not only just like big logs, but also like tinder and stuff and medium-sized sticks, so you can feed the fire whatever it needs right then, and you don't have to leave for 10 or 20 minutes to go in the woods and gather some more things. When we were cooking, we ended up needing one person to, cook the food, and then someone to tend the fire, and then someone else would go gather things periodically. But that's not sustainable long term. It'd be better to have one person in charge of the food while the 2 other people could be doing other projects. So if we were doing this more long term, we would definitely gather all of our wood ahead of time before beginning our meal prep. Then the last thing on the list of things we learned from this practice round of living without electricity is you just have to get used to the smell of smoke on everything. On you, on your food, on your clothes, in your hair. Especially with how hard it is to bathe and use the shower if you are using rainwater. There is no way you can shower 2 or 3 times a day to get the smoke smell off, since if you do, you'll have to cook another meal soon anyways and get smoky again. It's just much better to get used to the smoky smell, especially if you're the one in charge of cooking all the meals on a fire. So those are most of the things we learned, all the things we can remember learning anyways, of our practice round of living without electricity. Boy, was this experience fun, and I'm excited to do it again eventually in a few months, and put all these things we learned into practice, and hopefully have a much better experience, though this first experience was pretty great too. Thanks for watching!